I thought that my retirement was a given. Retirement was the end goal that I'd worked all my life for, but it always seemed to be just a little bit out of reach. I'm from the UK, and I started going to Thailand a very, very long time ago. Thailand became my yearly escape. It was the place where I could rewind after a difficult year, and the place I always wished I could live. My first time in the country was all the way back in 1985. I was 14 years old, and my dad had been posted to the country as part of his work. We only lived there for a year, but it was the most memorable year of my whole childhood, and when we left the following year, the memories were etched in my mind, and I couldn't wait to go back. Back in 1985, Thailand was nothing like it is today. I watch a lot of YouTube videos at the moment, and when people say that Thailand has changed, I think they're talking about how much it has changed since when they first arrived themselves, for example, in 2015. I find statements like that to be quite funny. While it has changed, the real change happened a long time ago. Nothing is recognizable anymore, but I'm not saying that's a negative thing. I love Thailand regardless of what has happened to the country, and the developments that came over the years were a huge bonus for the country and made Thailand a better place. I do count myself very fortunate to have witnessed what Thailand was like all those years ago. I didn't get back to Thailand until my 35th birthday. That was in 2001 to be precise, and that was when my love affair with Thailand was reinvigorated, and I decided that it would become the only place I would visit when I had a holiday from work. I had done a lot of dating in my 20s, yet I never met someone who I wanted to have a long-term relationship with. When I went back to Thailand in 2001, I decided to completely forget about dating in the UK because what it was like there just seemed to be different than how things were in Thailand. I thought I would cram in all the years worth of dating I missed into my 3-week Thailand holidays. It was my dream to retire to Thailand as soon as possible, and I was working hard, but I don't think I was working smart. I was saving a lot of money throughout the year, and then I was spending all of it in Thailand. Therefore, I wasn't saving anything for retirement. But by the time the end of the year came, I needed my Thailand fix. So I didn't think skipping a year to save money for retirement. I thought I just need to get there and live for the moment. Thailand was everything that I wanted my country to be. Cheap and affordable with amazing nightlife. There were things about Thailand that just made sense, that back home didn't. Things that were meant to be cheap were cheap, yet if you wanted to splurge for something expensive, you could. It just felt like they did things right in Thailand, and I was having these opinions very early on when I was there in 2001. Like many people, I was drawn to the nightlife scene in Thailand. The nightlife scene in Bangkok was a lot better back then, and I spent half my time there and half my time in Pattaya. I did also go to other places in Thailand for a look throughout the years, going up to Chiang Mai, Phuket, and quite a few of the islands. But most of the time I gravitated towards Bangkok and Pattaya. As the years progressed, I started spending less time in Bangkok on my holidays and more time in Pattaya, and Thailand really was the highlight of my year. There was no way I would rather have been in Thailand than anywhere else, but what it meant was I was having the worst year I could have to be able to afford the best 3 weeks I could afford. I wasn't really moving ahead with my career. I think that's what I'm trying to say, because all I cared about was getting money together for Thailand. I usually went during the high season as well, which meant things were slightly more expensive. But back in the early 2000s, it didn't really make a difference when you went because it wasn't quite as popular as it is today. Although it was still extremely popular. I had a lot of girlfriends in Thailand, but never met a girl that I wanted to get serious with. The idea of having a long-term relationship with someone was something that I thought was not a good idea. I was very hesitant about it. I knew people who did it, and they always ended up having to send money to their girlfriend back in Thailand, and they were never really sure if she'd stopped working in the bar that she was working in or not. How was he to know? I didn't want to be that guy, and I made sure that I wasn't that guy. I could wait for a long-term relationship when I could finally move there. I didn't work a very exciting job. I wasn't paid a lot of money, but it did see me getting to Thailand every year. But one thing that did happen at work was I became the Thailand guy. When somebody else in the office said they were going to Thailand for a holiday, I'd be the guy who felt like it was his mission, more than that, his duty to offer advice on what to do and where to go in Thailand because I'd been so many times. I don't think people appreciated my advice, but I felt that Thailand belonged to me more than it belonged to them, so they had to listen to me because I'd been there so many times and it was my world. Thailand was my world. So it was only right that they gave me the time of day to listen to what to do in Thailand. I think that's one of the reasons why, although I've got into watching Thailand-based YouTubers, some of these guys have been there for such a short amount of time, watching them give advice on what to do in the country, I find it really offensive. I believe you shouldn't be able to give advice about living in a country unless you've actually lived there for a big portion of your life. That would be my take, but I guess that's not really for me to say. Every year, since 2001 until 2010, I was in Thailand without fail. I was getting older, but I was still getting no closer to retirement, and there was no end in sight. I was paying off my mortgage on my house. I still had about 5 years left on that, and when that was paid off, that would be a step closer to Thailand. But there were still many steps to go. 2011 was the only year I didn't go. I made a spur-of-the-moment decision to go to the Philippines instead. The biggest mistake of my life, that was. Although I had an okay time there, it just wasn't the same as Thailand. I thought it was going to be more in-your-face than Thailand was, yet Thailand, which was more in-your-face than the Philippines. But I don't regret it now, because it was something else. It was something different that made me reaffirm my beliefs about Thailand. It wasn't that I needed confirmation that Thailand was the country for me, but that's how I was thinking about when I was returning from the Philippines back home for another year of work. If I didn't reason to myself like this, then it would have been a very devastating understanding that I was a year away from being able to go to where I actually wanted to go, which was Thailand. But I did return to Thailand in 2012 up to 2015 every single year. In early 2016, that's when some big events happened that saw me being able to move to Thailand immediately. For a start, I paid off my mortgage. My house was worth £170,000, so I would be able to sell that and use that money in the early stages. But I had sad news. Unfortunately, a family member of mine passed away, yet I found out that they left most of their assets to me. I couldn't believe that. I was left all the money. It was about £1.3 million, and I don't want to get into too much detail about who left it to me or why, but all the other family members, my brothers, my sister, my cousins, none of them got anything. It was a very strange time for the whole family, as why was I given the money yet they weren't? I always thought it went back to my early childhood because I was the one who always spent time with this family member. They were my world, and I spoke to them every single day on the phone, even when I was partying in Thailand. I was speaking to them on the phone because they were a very important person for me. That was my reasoning as to why I was left their money and nobody else was. I was the closest to them, I loved them the most, and I always spoke to them. Never with the intention of getting any money, because if the money had been divided between everybody, it would have been maybe £60,000 each. But all of a sudden, I was left with this sum of money, and that made me realise that now Thailand is open to me, and what on earth am I doing still working this job? I didn't give any notice to my job, I just didn't turn up one day. When they called and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't want to work anymore, I've had enough." That was a very special time. My work could no longer hold anything over me, and I think that's the moment in anyone's life that is the best feeling. When you no longer have to rely on a job to sustain you. For me, it was one of the highlights of my life, and I was already putting plans in place to get myself permanently to Thailand. I had so many dreams about what I was going to do in Thailand. With that amount of money, I could live the best life that up until then I could have only ever dreamed of. Thailand wasn't just going to be a place for retirement. It was going to be a place that I could thrive in retirement and hopefully build something from the ground up. I can imagine the rest of my family were very disappointed with the outcome, but as far as I was concerned, there was nothing they could do about it, because the will was clearly written and it stated what it stated. So, as far as I thought, there was absolutely no leg they had to stand on. It was wonderful, yet very sad at the same time, because I lost a huge part of my life. It felt strange not being able to speak to this person anymore, and the funeral was the one that was so difficult. I was the one who got up and spoke, and I did vow that when I did do whatever I was going to do in Thailand, I would do it in their name, with them in mind. That's how much that person meant to me. If you're not from the UK, you probably don't know how the situation works when it comes to an inheritance. It's not like you just get the money straight away. The executives are appointed to manage it, and I was an executor. And then you've got to do lots of things to do with tax, and then it goes into probate, and months and months and months go by with very little happening. It drags on, and you've got to get a solicitor involved, and they charge so much more money than they should to be able to do something like that. I find it very, very bad. I find the whole process very strange. You shouldn't need to employ somebody to help manage your inheritance, but they make it so complicated. It's like this profession was created out of thin air for nothing. If you're a solicitor or a lawyer, let me tell you that I don't like you. Your profession should not exist as far as I'm concerned. All you do is take people's money away from them because the law is too difficult for normal people to navigate around. It should be easy. People should be able to do it themselves. And that's what I want to say, and I apologise, but this is my only rant, so I hope you don't consider cutting this out of the story. What everything meant, though, was it was going to take at least a year before I saw that money, and probably a little longer. So I could sell my house and get started in retirement, and saying that word at the time was great. I'm retired, and I never need to work again. Plus, I've got so much money that I'm going to have a great retirement. But I did sell my house. I got rid of that quite quickly. I put it on for slightly under the market price just to shift it very quickly, with the understanding that the person buying it would be a cash buyer and they would agree to complete very quickly. That was rushed through a lot quicker than normal, and 2 months later, I had the money in the bank, and as soon as that arrived, I was flying first class to Thailand. First class on British Airways from London to Bangkok. I've never even been in business class before, let alone first class, and that was an experience to behold. Champagne, great meal service, comfortable. Now that was how you were meant to fly, and I was going to start my retirement the right way. I was excited at the prospect of finally meeting a girl who I wasn't scared to start to fall for. I tried to avoid falling for girls before because I would have had to have left, and it would have been awful. But now I don't have to leave because I've got enough money, so I couldn't wait to find a relationship as quickly as possible. Based on how much money I was going to have, even though I was already just over 50 years old, I was hoping to find someone who was around 25. That just seemed like the perfect age difference based on everything I thought about. Arriving in Thailand and newly retired and a newly made individual, I couldn't hold back. I spent the first 3 months in Pattaya, going out every single day and not even looking at the price on the menu. I would go into a really nice restaurant and just order what I wanted. I never did that before. I'd always look at the prices and, well, I might want the 1,500 baht steak, but I would end up getting the 400 baht pork chop. I was always that guy. But now I wasn't, and I could order everything I wanted because it didn't matter anymore. It was after those 3 months in Pattaya that I met a girl. That was the girl that I wanted to get into a serious relationship with. She was actually 23, but she was everything I was looking for. I've met lots of girls, but she was different for me. I moved quickly, and after another 3 months, she'd already been living with me in my place that I rented in Pattaya. I rented a very nice place. It was about 40,000 baht every month. It was a 2-bedroom unit overlooking the ocean, but it was very nice. I was starting to enjoy how the other half lived because now I was part of this other half, and I was just showering money around like it was nothing. I had the sale of my house money, which was about £170,000, but I also had £40,000 on top of that, which were just savings that I had over the years. So I wasn't concerned about money because I was going to be getting my inheritance, but that could still take around a year. But it did seem like things were running smoothly, which I was very happy about. A month after she moved in with me, I wanted to get married. She was perfect, and there was no reason for me to think otherwise. So she agreed to get married, and I was happy. And one of the things she said was she wants me to go and meet her family, and we were to have a big party in the village, which was in Korat. I'd never been to a Thailand village before. I'd never been serious with a girl before because, as I said, I didn't want to have to leave and then send money for her when I wasn't even with her. So that would have been my first experience going to that part of Thailand, and I couldn't wait. I was on cloud nine. I had the ability to just do what I wanted to do, and I couldn't believe how great life could be when you finally had that ability. If you don't have that ability to be able to just do what you want when you want, you're missing out because it's amazing. I believed that if we were going up to the village, I needed to buy a car. I didn't own a car in Thailand yet, so I bought a Honda CR-V. I paid cash for it, and that was just over £30,000. And yes, that was on my name, of course it was. But it was a brand new car, and it felt very good to be able to just walk into the dealership and say, I want that one, please. And then I was the guy who went to the bank to get all the cash out, and I just pulled the cash out of the bag and handed it over for the car. That felt incredible, and although I couldn't take the car home that day, 2 days later it was ready to collect. I always found it amusing in Thailand when you went to buy a car or do anything. Perhaps because I'd never bought a brand new car in the UK, so I don't know how they do things in the UK. But in Thailand, they put a red ribbon around the bonnet of the car, and then they wanted to take a picture of me and my girlfriend standing in the car smiling. They even told me to point at the car, which I thought was funny. One of the things you see in all the pictures when the police catch someone in Thailand is someone pointing at the contraband or the suspect, as if without pointing it wasn't clear what was going on in the picture. But that was one of the things about Thailand that was different, that you had to enjoy, and I loved how they presented the car to me, even though it was funny. The following day, we drove up to her village. It took a while to get used to driving on the roads because it was a bit more of a free-for-all in Thailand than it was at home, but I really loved it. I loved not having to care about the speed cameras on the roads because apparently, if you got a ticket in the post for a 500 baht fine, all you needed to do was rip it up and put it in the bin because they didn't really enforce the speeding fines. It was wonderful, and we arrived in her village about 8 hours after leaving Pattaya. I was very taken aback when we arrived in the village. It was amazing, yet scary at the same time. It felt like the place you'd go to have a country retreat. The place where you'd have a nice big house with a big plot of land and a tennis court, a swimming pool, a games room, a snooker room. That's what I was thinking about, like, that would be great to have. And maybe you'd spend a week or two there every year, or a month there every year, just relaxing and getting your head in order before going back to the craziness of Pattaya. Her family were great, and I was happy to agree to 500,000 baht sinsod. My girlfriend had no kids, so that was acceptable for me, and I wasn't concerned about the money. So we were going to get married and have the ceremony, and when we did, it was an experience like no other. It was so different to how people get married at home, but I bet somebody from Thailand going and seeing how somebody gets married in the UK would also be shocked at how different it was. We spent about a week in the village. I stayed in the family's house, although I didn't want to. I did because I wanted to show respect. But I was happy to leave back to Pattaya and back to our amazing condo. I was going through money quite quickly, but I still had most of the sale of my house left. And it was when we were back in Pattaya that I talked to my now wife about building a country retreat in the village. I thought build a country retreat as the first option, and then after that my own place in Pattaya. And then, when the rest of the money has arrived, I'll probably go and buy a place in Bangkok. It was so exciting to think about everything I could do, and the money would not run out. It was an amazing feeling. My wife liked the idea of building a place. I had it all pictured like I wanted it to be. I didn't want a normal house, I wanted it to be a big house. Not overly big that it's going to cost so much money, but when you see houses that are built for £50,000 that look really good, I thought if we spend £100,000 on a house, not including the land, then we're going to have something very good. We decided that's what we would do, but we were going away for 2 weeks after we got married to have a honeymoon. I'd always wanted to go to India. I'd never been, and I asked my wife if she would be okay with going to India for 2 weeks. She said yes, so we went to India. I wanted to go to Calcutta, and yes, I will call it Calcutta because it's called Calcutta, not Kolkata. And when we got there, I really did like it. But my wife, she was not feeling it. I think she was appalled, and that's the best thing to say. So I said, okay, let's just spend 2 days here and we'll cancel, go somewhere else instead. I wasn't bothered that I'd spent a fortune on hotels, I didn't care. But I had a good look around Calcutta, which was a place that meant a lot to me based on family history. And then we flew to Japan and spent a bit of time there, which she was a lot more happy about. I liked Japan as well, but I preferred India. But I wasn't bothered either way because life was good. When we got back to Thailand, we went up to the village straight away. I wanted to find some land that was big enough to have everything that I wanted. The idea was to just get the main house structure in place and then build additions in the future. This wasn't going to be a place where we would live full time. Perhaps we'd have a caretaker who would live there just to look after the place when we weren't there. But we could spend a week every 2 months, something like that, and it was just going to be so perfect. It was quite difficult to find land that met my exact specifications. It had to be as close to a square as possible, and the surroundings had to be not really near any other people's houses. Yet at the same time, the land had to already be used for something else that wasn't going to disturb us. It was a very stringent thing what I was looking for, and I can't really explain in much detail without actually going there and pointing out what I was talking about. But we did find somewhere, and it was 2 million baht. It was a very big piece of land, and it was actually quite close to the big main road, so that was a benefit. And on one side, there was a road that went further down into the village, so there was a barrier between our land and the land on the other side of the road. On the other side of the land, there were a lot of trees that had just been planted, and these were the sort of trees that were going to be there for years before they were cut down, so it was a great location in order to not to be too concerned about goings-on adjacent plots. I'm spending money, but I'm speaking to my solicitor every day. Unfortunately, because I had to speak to the solicitor even though I would have preferred if there was no solicitor involved, and he just kept saying it's moving forward, it's going to get there soon. So I'm just thinking, let's move ahead and pay for the house build. After everything, I had about £100,000 left, and then we went to speak to some professional builders, and I gave them a rough guide as to what we were looking for. It turned out what I was looking for was going to cost more than I expected. While £100,000 could build you an absolutely amazing house in rural Thailand, what I was looking for was a bit more grand, and the budget was going to be around 200,000. So I was way off, and I just said to my wife, well, this money is going to come in a few months' time. Let's wait and build the house then. But I was itching to do something. I desperately wanted to take the next step, but we did decide that we would wait a few months and start building afterwards. We didn't want to compromise, or should I say I didn't want to compromise on the type of house that I wanted to build. And yes, it was my intention to get a lease when the house was complete, but I didn't get a lease on the land, and we're going to do that when the house is built, so that was okay. When we came to the decision to wait for the money to build the house, we did return to Pattaya and back into our great condo, and I was just waiting, thinking about things to do, and that was when I thought, why don't I go and buy a condo? I wanted to buy a few condos when I got the money in and rent them out, just to have a little bit of income in Thailand from things in Thailand as a way to not worry about the exchange rate. Throughout my time in Thailand, I'd seen the exchange rate vary so differently, I thought it would be a good idea to have a little bit of income coming in Thailand without having to worry about that. So we went to look around Pattaya for an investment condo, and I thought I would spend about £70,000. That way, once we've got that, I would still have enough money left to just wait for the rest of the money to arrive, and it would feel like I was taking another logical step. It didn't take long to find a condo that I was interested in. My wife liked it as well. I bought it. It was a 1-bedroom unit, and it also had views of the ocean, and it was right in the heart of Pattaya. Lots of people were using Airbnb in the building, and while that's technically illegal in Thailand, I thought, well, if other people are doing it, maybe I can do the same. So it went okay. It was great getting that condo and getting it transferred onto my name and having the title deed to it and owning a piece of Thailand. Although it wasn't a piece of Thailand like it would have been if it was a house, but it was the next best thing. Over the next 2 weeks, I did a bit of the renovation work myself. Although foreigners aren't technically meant to do that, it was my own condo and nobody could see. I liked doing things like that. It wasn't that I couldn't afford to pay somebody to do the work for me, but I'd always done my own work and I was very good at it. So I turned it into a nice little unit. 2 weeks later is the day I remember as being the worst day of my life. I was sat in an agent's office talking about my condo when I got a call. I was going to leave the condo with them and they could rent it out for me. But this call sort of took me aback. My solicitor called me. He'd never called me before on the phone, and I expected the phone call was good news to say that the money was ready to be transferred to me. But that's not what he said. He said he had some bad news. Everybody else in the family had contested the will because they felt like it wasn't fair that only I was getting the money. And although the will was clear, because they've contested it, it was going to take a long time to get a resolution, so be prepared to wait for what could be years before I saw any more money. I told him that I didn't have any money left. I'd spent a lot of money based on the understanding I was getting this very soon. Is there any way that I can countersue them or something to get them to stop? Is there a way I can offer them a token amount of money to get them to stop? Maybe £10,000 each? Is there anything I can do? And he just said, well, you could try. They've done this, so you're going to have to play along. There's nothing really you can do. I just walked out of the agent's office without saying anything to them, and I just said, get the condo listed, and I walked back to the condo I was renting, and I had to tell my wife what had happened. I told her that it could take a very long time until I got any of the money now, and I've got about 30,000 left and that's it. We had the land that we bought, we had a brand new car that I bought, we got a condo that I bought, so we need to decide what to do. My wife was very supportive. She didn't change all of a sudden, she didn't start going out, she didn't do anything. But it was a very difficult situation. Unfortunately though, it was far worse than I thought it was. When I started to look into how the process worked, it could be 3 or 4 years before we saw anything, and it could cost tens of thousands of pounds in legal fees, and the fact that they were prepared to do that meant that even if I won, I wouldn't get 1.3 million, I might only see 1.15 because of all the rest of the fees and legal costs that went on top. One of the reasons again why I don't like that profession. It shouldn't exist. Things should be basic and people should be able to do things themselves. Yet that was something that I found out very early on. Because they put a caveat in pretty much at the last minute, things dragged on as long as they did. That means probate couldn't be granted. Because probate couldn't be granted, I couldn't get the money. And they employed a legal team to say that the person who left the money to me wasn't of sound mind when the will was written. Yet, when the person was unwell, I was of the understanding it was left to me because I was the one who spent most time with them and always called them every single day. Nobody else did. And they just thought that they were entitled to this money, but it was given to me. The more I looked into things, the more depressed I became. I had £30,000 and the way I was spending money, that would have lasted 6 months. But now I needed to try stretch that out even longer. I talked to my solicitor and said, offer everyone £10,000 out of this, and then get them to drop it so we can move forwards. That would have cost me a lot of money, but I'd have still had enough money where it wouldn't have been a problem, but I thought it would be worth trying. The solicitor said he would try, but he phoned me back later saying that while most people agreed to it, 2 of them didn't, and because of that, it was going to be a no-go. What about if we increase it to 15,000? Would that be okay? But that would be the highest I would be prepared to go. But still, these 2 people refused, so that was not going to happen. I asked my solicitor if they had any evidence, and he just said, well, that's their job. They've got to prove that the person wasn't of sound mind. The will was written not too long before the person passed away, and they were going to try to prove that it was written a number of years beforehand, then changed, and it would have said something completely different. There was also going to be tax to pay out of the will, and it was a very complicated system because technically you got 300 and something thousand pounds tax-free, and then everything else is taxed. But part of it was because of a home and part of it was an allowance for the person's partner. It meant a bigger chunk of it was tax-free, but it was still going to be some tax to pay. They came back with a counter-offer saying if everybody had £30,000 each, then they would lift the caveat and also sign a deed of variation saying that they can't contest it again. The problem was, because there were so many people, we had a big family, that would have been more than half the money, and it just seemed to be unrealistic. Yet that's what I should have done, if I look back. I should have swallowed my pride and said take it, and still had enough money to have a great time, but I'd already spent the money in my mind and things that I wanted to do. I wanted more condos, I wanted the country getaway, I wanted to buy a really nice car, and they're expensive in Thailand, so I needed the money that I thought I was going to get, so that's why I denied. This was in 2017, and when this is happening, and that's the best case scenario, it could be 2020 by the time things get resolved. It could take longer. I just had to resign myself to that fact that I was going to have to spend a lot less money for a lot of years, and it was devastating. We had to move out of the condo we rented and move into the condo I bought. It was a small one-bedroom unit, and it was a bit of a downgrade, but it was still a really nice condo, so I couldn't complain. We didn't go out as much anymore, and I spent my whole time thinking about the case and how I was going to get the money and when I was going to get the money, dreaming about what I was going to do when it arrived, yet not knowing what the outcome would be. Time drags on, and I decided that I could spend £10,000 a year, and that would have taken me to 2020, and I managed to keep within that budget. At the end of 2017, I'm nearly at breaking point, because that's when they got their evidence together, and there were medical records saying the person had a particular illness, and that wasn't good for the mind. They had records to say that the will was written they had this illness. Regardless of if at the time it was written, they were perfectly okay. The fact that sometimes they weren't okay, that could play a big part of it. I found out that the solicitor that aided in writing the will didn't get a medical capacity assessment, so that would weaken my case. But at the end of 2017, that's when they had all their evidence prepared, and then it was now my solicitor's turn to prepare evidence. Even based on the evidence they had, my solicitor said that there was still a good chance of us winning, but there's a good chance you're not going to, and offer them a settlement. I offered everyone £25,000, but they rejected it. I offered £30,000, which was their offer before, and they rejected that as well. And it's just a very difficult situation because it's costing money. Money is being wasted because of what they're doing, and this money is meant to be for me, not for a solicitor, and it's meant to already be with me, and what they're doing is disgraceful. By the end of 2018, I'd already gathered all the evidence that we needed. I was down to about £10,000, and they came to me and said, we want £50,000 each. That would have meant I would have had enough money to retire, but not enough money to build a house, not enough money to buy another condo, not enough money to do anything apart from live. So I countered and offered them £35,000, but they didn't accept that. I went to £40,000 each, and they didn't accept that either. But I was still confident that I had a very good chance of winning. But the problem was, if I didn't, I wouldn't have enough money to live in retirement. So what do? Play it safe and make sure I've got enough for retirement, or take a risk and not have enough money for retirement, or have an amount of money that I have always dreamed about? What would anybody else do in that situation? But as it was dragging on and the money was going down, I just didn't know what to do. It was at the end of 2018 that I started drinking heavily to cope with the stress and the pressure that I was under all the time. My wife was starting to get bored because all I'm doing every day is looking into the case and looking at what I can do and how other outcomes have happened in the past. That's all I'm doing. And then she's starting to go out more because I'm just getting drunk in the condo by myself. And it was only a small condo, so it wasn't comfortable for her. There was one time I didn't leave the condo for 3 weeks. I don't think I even showered. I was that desperate, just trying to think about what to do. When I asked my solicitor when we knew that we had all this evidence, and they had their evidence, what are the chances? And he just said it could go either way. If he had to bet, he would think we were going to win, and that's what the chances were, but there was a big chance that we wouldn't. I'd already racked up a lot of legal fees, so that was going to come out of the total, but I thought maybe I would offer them £40,000 each one more time, and if they took it, then I would just accept that I would still have a retirement, but I can't build a house in the village, and I can't buy any more condos, but I could still have a good retirement. They came back and said that based on the advice they were given, they would take it. What they would have ended up with each, if they'd won, would have been about £70,000. So they took it, and I gave it away because of legal pressure and because of a warped system, a big chunk of money that was left to me by what was the most important person in the world to me, had gone. I just wished them all the worst luck ever, and I hoped their lives would be worse because of it. I hated every single one of them. The fact that they did that just shows that family isn't what you think it is. But halfway through 2019, I received the money that I got, which was about £310,000. It was a relief when I got the money, but that was the amount of money I was going to spend on the country retreat. I was going to spend the same again on condos, and I was going to have more than that left. So it was a very bitter pill to swallow, but at the same time I was glad to have the whole thing over with. I could then get on with the business of enjoying my retirement. But the sad part of it was, I told my wife that we weren't going to be able to build a house. We're going to be doing all kinds of other things that we talked about. We can't do them. We're just going to be living. That's when things started to go badly between us. All the money I had was still in the UK. She didn't know how much I had. She didn't know anything about anything apart from the fact that things were held up. So I wasn't concerned that she was going to get any of that. But what did happen was we got divorced in Thailand because she just didn't want to stay with me anymore. She was expecting all kinds of things, as was I, and when that didn't happen, even though we could still have a good time, it felt like a huge downgrade for her, I think. I think that's why she did what she did, even though she would have still been better off staying with me. But we got divorced, and I just had to give her $1 million back just so she didn't give me any more problems. She kept the land, but I kept the car and the condo and all the money. So at the end of 2019, I'm single, I own a condo in Pattaya, I own a car, and I've got just under £300,000 left after giving some to my ex-wife before we divorced. And then COVID happened, so everywhere is closed. And I went into a very big depression. While I was okay in the sense that my retirement was going to be okay, I was just so heartbroken that all the things I wanted to do were only dreams. And most of all, I was heartbroken that all those people in my family ruined my life. I didn't like living in that condo. It was meant to be a rental unit, so I sold it. It took a while to sell, but I got rid of it. I met someone else during COVID and I fell in love with them, and I got married again. I didn't tell them about my financial situation, but for some reason, I did end up building a small house in their village. In 2023, that marriage came to an end and I lost a house, and I moved back to Pattaya, where I live today, in a small rented condo, and I live on about 60,000 baht a month. I don't have a bad life. I've gotten over everything that has happened, but life could have given so much more, and it should have given so much more, if it wasn't for the actions of my family. I lost money to 2 wives that I had in Thailand. They were both younger than me, and I did some crazy things. I built that house in my second wife's village because I thought that I would be able to live there and spend less money, so that half the time we could go somewhere else and spend more money. My reasoning was, if I could spend 60,000 baht a month in Pattaya, well, let's say spend 30,000 baht a month in the village for 6 months, and then 90,000 baht a month for 6 months in Pattaya. But I just didn't like being in the village. The country retreat I wanted to build would have been something else. It wouldn't have been in a village. It would have been disconnected from the village because it would have been on such a big piece of land. And they would have had things so separate that it didn't feel like I was in the village. It was just in the village. I don't know if this story would be of interest because it's mainly to do with how my life went wrong because of a warped system in the UK, more specifically England. I'm not talking about Scotland in this sense. It's more to do with that than Thailand, but I did make some crazy decisions in Thailand, and I started to spend the money I had before I had it, and then I didn't have it. I guess if I didn't buy the land for 2 million baht, if I didn't buy the car for 1.5 million baht, and I didn't spend lavishly or get married, I could have had 2 more rental units there, which is something I wanted to have. But you don't know at the time, and you do what you think's best. So that's my story, and please feel free to use it. While I consider my retirement to be the ultimate letdown of letdowns, I consider my retirement to be a nightmare compared to what it was going to have been. I guess I have to count myself lucky that I'm not like some of the guys who had to leave back to their own country because they lost absolutely everything. I want to finish by saying that that was something that happened to one of my close friends here only 6 months ago. He did the whole village thing and spent half the time in Pattaya. We used to meet up regularly for drinks, and when my disaster happened in the village, I lost that house, and I was okay because I could still continue living in Pattaya. But he was heavily invested in the village to the point that if something went wrong, he would have had to leave. And that's what happened. It happens to so many people. I don't know what it is about building houses in a village. I see people all the time claiming how happy they are that they've built houses in their wives' villages, yet they're happy until they're not. It's one of those situations where you're happy, 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 dreadful, and there's no in between. So if you're considering it, or if you're living it and enjoying it, it's going to be a sharp, sudden, and painful drop when something goes wrong. I've seen it, I've witnessed it, so you need to take that into consideration. I lost a lot. I did some crazy things, but my nightmare didn't wake me up. I'm still living it, and I'll live it forever because I can't ever forget about what happened and how my family betrayed me.